To Los Angeles now, and Dahlia Dusser-Kay, Director of the Center for Mideast Public Policy at the RAND Corporation. Dahlia, thank you for coming in. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
I want you to listen to a little more from the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. He was asked specifically what more he could say about these threats coming from Iran.
I can't say much more. I think the Department of Defense has said that these were very specific. These were attacks that were imminent. That is, they were attacks that were going to happen fairly soon. We learned about them. We've taken every action we can to deter them. Other than that, I just can't say anymore.
Here's the problem. When the US president has repeatedly lied to the American people, when he's ordered his senior aides and others who serve in the White House to lie to Congress, told them to lie to investigators and to the American people as well. All this intelligence they have, it could be real, it could be credible, but it just seems a stretch right now for this administration to go out and say, trust us.
Yeah, well, look, I think we have to take the threat seriously. It's no secret that the Iranians have a lot of capabilities that could be targeted against U.S. forces in the region. It's not hypothetical. They've done it before during the Iraq War after 2003, killed hundreds of U.S. forces. But yeah, the context here is really important. Before we start hyping up a frenzy of concern and moving toward a war posture, we need to think about put this threat in context and understand that the U.S. has also been escalating our own posture toward the Iranians. This is not happening in a vacuum, and so we are now at the one-year anniversary. I'm not sure a complete coincidence that this visit is happening at that time, the movement of the aircraft carrier. And we've had a number of escalatory measures over the past month, the ending of waivers to squeeze the Iranians, as well as the designation of the IRGC force as a foreign terrorist organization. So none of this escalation is terribly surprising, and I think it's what many expected.
Yeah, there's an opinion piece in the Washington Post which sort of takes it one step further. It reads, the Trump administration lies at a record-setting pace, and National Security Advisor John Bolton himself was credibly accused of twisting intelligence in the past to justify U.S. action against Iraq and Cuba. The current hyping of the Iranian threat reminds some analysts of the run-up to the Iraq War, a terrible mistake that Bolton still defends. And yeah, I remember that. And there are definite similarities here. But back then, you had a president who was very eager for war. Trump at least still seems reluctant to get into a war in the Middle East. That does not mean he could not stumble into some kind of all-out confrontation.
Well, yeah, we're in a really serious moment where there may not be an intention to go to war, but yeah, this escalation could very well get us here. And I think also we should be careful not to put all of this on, let's say, hawkish advisors like National Security Council Advisor Bolton. I mean, let's face it, President Trump came into office with Iran as a centerpiece of his posture in the region of countering the Iranian threat of the worst deal ever. In fact, President Trump chose to withdraw from the Iran agreement over the objections of his advisors at that time. So this is, this is still the president's decision to move on this escalation with Iran. And I think, just kind of putting it on hawkish advisors really takes away, I think, the responsibility the president himself has. And we should be very careful not to move down the path we did in 2003 without really scrutinizing intelligence carefully, really understanding the context in which this whole alleged crisis is emerging.
There was that bizarre moment in the early days of the Trump administration with then National Security Advisor Michael Flynn in the briefing room putting Iran on double notice or something.
From day one, Iran was on notice, yeah.
Wednesday will be a year to the day that the Trump administration withdrew from the Iran nuclear treaty. In the past 12 months, Tehran remained, I guess, fairly much in compliance with the agreement, but I guess they received very little in way of sanctions relief. So they're now expected on Wednesday that some small parts of its nuclear program will actually resume. So what parts would that be? Does it matter if it's small parts or big parts, significant parts, little parts, whatever? They're back in the nuclear business, right?
Yeah, I think of course it matters, but I think the bigger picture is what's important, which is, we're a year after the U.S. withdrawal of the deal, and we have to be asking ourselves, what has been achieved? What is the goal? Have we been reaching strategic objectives? If the objective is, do we get a better deal? Well, clearly we haven't seen the Iranians coming to the table for a better deal. In fact, now we're hearing that they may resume nuclear activities that are not acceptable. We're a year into this withdrawal of the agreement, and yet we're talking about war. And we're talking about escalation, and we're talking about very concerning Iranian behavior in the region. This is what the withdrawal from the deal supposedly was supposed to achieve, is better Iranian behavior or a better Iran deal. We are not seeing that. So I think it's really a time to ask some hard questions. What is Iran policy right now in the United States from this administration trying to achieve. And it's very worrying. And I think right now we're moving on a path where, again, it may not be the intention, but the escalation, I think we need to take it very seriously. We cannot just assume this is just a posture that is just symbolic. I think the threat is really real on both sides.
Very quickly, almost out of time, but Iran's foreign minister, at least on Twitter, seemed to dismiss this military deployment from Washington. The B team is at it again, he tweeted. From announcements of naval movements that actually occurred last month to dire warnings about so-called Iranian threats. If US and clients don't feel safe, it's because they're despised by the people of the region. Blaming Iran won't reverse that. Despite the sort of snark in all of this, how concerned are they right now in Tehran just simply with the presence of so much US firepower?
I think they're concerned. They're relatively isolated. Yes, they still have Russians and Chinese behind them. The Europeans are still very much in favor of keeping the nuclear deal. But if the Iranians make moves that alienate the Europeans, the Iranians are really going to be left quite in a corner. And actually, that's what concerns me, because there's no off-ramp here. We're not really giving the Iranians a way out. And, for them, this is going to be existential. And right now, you're seeing all factions within Iran kind of digging in their heels and looking for a way to survive this. And so I don't think that's likely to lead to good outcomes. And so we could see actually even more escalation and more destabilizing behavior from the Iranians. And, some could argue that, and I've heard this in places like Israel, that there may be an interest in having the Iranians leave the agreement. It will make it easier to get international pressure and get the United States more backing for this maximum pressure campaign. But again, it's not clear where this ends.
That's the problem. And Dalia,
Yes.
I guess we have to keep watching. So thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.